Helga Hulse, welcome to the Jackson Center. Why did your parents end up in Hawaii?
They were married in Hawaii, and for the business part of their association, my father had been offered the position of Assistant Chief Civil Engineer of the archipelago, but of course he was concentrated on the inhabited islands, which were the 9 famous ones. And he had just graduated from MIT as a civil engineer. In 1913, the islands were very beautiful forests, undeveloped in our terms, developed in the Hawaiian terms. And however, the vision was to have some roads and a library and some municipal buildings, etc. But most of all, the Aloha Tower. He was subsequently one of the 2 civil engineers who were participants in the construction of the Aloha Tower and the non-concomitant piers, which have now been taken away. Mm-hmm. Aloha Tower is freestanding, and it looks very lonesome to me. Mm-hmm. It needed those piers to complete the picture, the balance of the Aloha Tower and the piers was very beautiful. Now the big ships don't come into the harbor. They don't come to the Aloha Tower. They come down the coast to some, I would dare say, if I may, very funny-looking piers. Mm-hmm. They're not the MIT kinds of piers.
Right.
Yeah.
And your mother's background was what?
Her background was music, mm-hmm. and that's how they met. She was a student at New England Conservatory of Music, and he was a student at MIT, just a short few blocks away. And he attended her graduation recital at the request of one of his engineering friends, and they met at the reception.
Really? And the rest is beautiful music thereafter, huh?
Yes, thereafter was always beautiful music.
Was your mother a trained classical?
Yes,
yeah.
Yes.
When they went to Hawaii, did she then start teaching classes there?
She started a studio in Hawaii and taught 7 days a week, all day. And then she worked on 2 different master's degrees at the University of Hawaii.
Now, was it just so natural that you at age 3 would be part of her teaching group?
That I can't answer exactly. I was always attracted to the music and wanted to play, but at an early age my perceptions of playing were not really such that I could say I want to do this for the rest of my life.
What did your mother see in you that would actually lead her to take you to Chicago at age 6? Did she see something special there?
Well, she had taught me from 3. I started formal lessons on her schedule. With my music under my arm, I would walk into her studio, and I was treated like any student, which was a very good idea, because lots of parents say they can't teach their own children. Right. Really, they are the children's best teachers in every way. And now it's proven to be a fallacy to say so, because home teaching is becoming more and more successful and considered just the best of education. So they're teaching their children. And so she started me, and then when I was 6, 7, and 8, something like that, she took me to Chicago and New York for the summer to study with very eminent teachers.
So she was very much aware of the circuit of the top-notch musical colleges at the time.
Oh yes,
Yeah.
yes. She had studied with some of them prior to my appearance, and she kept up with everything, even in that remote area of Honolulu.
So you end up at the big city of Chicago as a young 6-year-old. What was your impression of Chicago during that time period?
Yes, the Chicago Musical College was very eminent. Joseph Levine was artist in residence one summer. I studied with Boguslavsky, very, very famous musician, and I studied with Rudolph Ganz, very, very revered musician.
How did they have a lot, were there other young students of your age there?
I didn't see any.
So,
There could have been, but I'm certain there were others. I couldn't be the only one.
maybe you were. When they use the term, I've heard it often about child prodigy. Did you ever think yourself as a child prodigy?
I didn't know what that word meant, but since that time, I've spoken with Joseph Hoffman. As a matter of fact, I had an audition with him, who said frequently, "I don't appreciate a child prodigy until he's 40 years old."
So you spent some time at Chicago. What was it that at Chicago that really made a difference as in your stepping stones?
Touching the hem of the masters.
Yeah. Did you appreciate it at the time, or was that something that your mother would have said, "Hey, you're being taught by somebody who's really incredible"?
I just felt it.
Yeah.
Those highly, or in many ways, in many fields, the most accomplished people have, to my way of thinking, a glow about them because they're selfless. They think of their art or their skill more important than themselves. They think about that while they're performing. There's a humility, I'd say a humbleness that goes with greatness.
So after you're at Chicago for a period of time, and was this sort of a summer institute, or were you there during the year? How long was it?
Well, we would go for the summer because my mother had her obligations in Hawaii, but I beg your pardon. And Chicago Musical College, as similar to other colleges, have a summer program.
Found yourself back in Honolulu, and ultimately you played before the Honolulu Symphony at age 11.
Yes, that was a very happy day for me. That was the Mozart D minor piano concerto. And Fritz Hart from Australia was the guest conductor at that time. And believe me, the Honolulu Symphony was excellent. Beautiful, beautiful players.
During this time period, your schooling, part of it's public, some of it's private schooling. Were you able to? How did you were able to mix the two school systems? Was it homeschooling with your mother, the private schools, or was it? How did that work?
I attended Punahou School until the 3rd grade, and then my mother took over from there because she just thought that would be convenient. It was convenient for her because she was right there, and her time was limited, and I would have to fit into her schedule, which was easier for her than if I went to public school. Punahou School was a private school.
Okay.
Come to think of it,
Did you, now your dad passed away at a very early age.
Yes, I was 3, and Honolulu suffered an epidemic of spinal meningitis to which he succumbed.
Do you have much corporate memory of your dad?
Only about 3 minutes worth, but it's vivid.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Did your mother then remarry?
She remarried about 25 years later,
Okay.
and to another engineer, this time a mining engineer.
Right. And did you, so basically it was more or less the two of you.
Yes, I had a brother,
Right.
a late brother, who was a mechanical engineer.
Okay.
He
Perfect.
played the violin.
You found yourself ultimately at the Curtis Music School in Philadelphia.
Yes.
How did that happen?
I auditioned.
Mhm.
My audition was with Joseph Hoffman. And then during the audition, his wife came in. She knocked first, and she asked him, she said, I want to go shopping, and I want to buy a hat. Do you have a $200 you can give me for my hat? This was early 30s, when
Yeah.
the $200 could pay the rent of a month for many families. And he said yes, and so she took her fund and said goodbye, and off she went. But it was a little homey interlude that relaxed me, you know, and I thought, well, I'm right at home.
Locally here, I think, did Josh Stafford also go to the Curtis Institute in Philadelphia?
Yes.
Did
yes.
his paths cross with you? Did you teach him at all?
Yes, I taught him. And I really believe I influenced him to go there. Yes.
What was he like as a student?
He was excellent, of course, very responsive. If I showed him something to do, he would accomplish it in sometimes the first time, sometimes the second, but it was very quick,
Yeah.
very rapid.
As you were going through these, back to your adolescence, going through those early years, whether it was Chicago, Honolulu, Philadelphia, and then Cincinnati, was there a certain particular composer that was kind of grabbing you more than others and saying, wow, this person and I are communing in nature here? Was there somebody special?
Still does, and that's Brahms. Brahms and I have something going. I acknowledge and adore Bach. He is indisputably the greatest of them all, and the great composers that I have heard of or met or played are students of his music. He's far and above everyone. And if he were born today, he'd be 500 years ahead of his time.
Right.
But Brahms and I have something special going.
What is it? Can you describe it?
Some of it is his combination of motifs. For example, and it runs totally through his compositions, from his symphonies to his intermezzi and capriccios. The succession of harmonies, a succession both parallel and horizontal of his composition, are consistently interesting, consistently rhythmically poignant, and the melodies he creates are sublime. And his use of those melodies in different instrumental, what do you call it? Well, the different instruments. And one hears French horn a great deal in his music. His favorite instrument was French horn. He's just special to me. And he's so consistent.
Second place is Bach. What makes him special to you?
Oh, he's impeccable. And Bach is not an exercise. Bach is a very passionate composer. he's he too is consistently great, and his the quality of his music is always beyond any criticism. Every note he writes is supposed to be there. You couldn't say, well, this note would do just as well. No, with Bach, it's the one that fits. It's heavenly music.
You played Bach, you played Brahms at your recital on Sunday. You also played Chopin. Tell me about what's that mean? What's he mean to you?
Chopin?
Yeah.
Chopin is so beautiful. I did mention in my recital, in a little speech, you might say, that some of Chopin's works have not been played. The other instruments. The piano has been played. Of course, he didn't write any symphonies, he didn't write any operas, but he wrote wonderful vocal pieces, and he wrote a cello sonata and some chamber music, one of which is a piano trio. I have never heard these works. I've heard the great cellists. I've heard Piatigorsky and Rostropovich and Leonard Rose, and there's Felix Salmon, all in the concert halls, because I was born when concert halls were there and the seats were filled. But as soon as television came out, people were staying at home watching things, and it's not the same.
Right.
But I've never heard the cello works. That was, we have to do something about that. That's unfinished business for musicians. We have to find out if that these works have to be beautiful, because he didn't write anything that wasn't beautiful. Some of his works are more accessible than others. His barcarolles and so on, Tarantella are not played as often. He was a composer who wrote short works better than anybody else. He just had a special gift for that.
You concluded your recital using playing some Debussy pieces. It was delightful. I could just see you're just excited about playing those. What's that mean? What's he mean to you?
Well, Debussy is so very beautiful. It never wears out. It's refreshing every time. When I play it, I can't speak for other people. It's so consonant, and most of it is programmatic music. And I love playing all of these works.
You also at your recital, you referred to a brief encounter you had with I'm going to blow the name of Schnabel.
Schnabel, yes.
Schnabel, thank you.
Schnabel, yes.
What was the circumstances, and what did he mean to you?
Well, I was living in the Lishniewski home. Karl Lishniewski, Dr. Karl Lishniewski, was a very, very prominent musician who grew up with Paderewski in Warsaw, a gentleman after the Manor born, a doctor of letters. And both he and Paderewski went to Leszczycki to further their piano studies. I say this only because he was a man of eminence. He himself, in his own way, was a master. And Schnabel and he were very good friends. Many of the greats were good friends with Dr. Lishniewski. Shared a suite of rooms with his daughter in this lovely big home. And he brought his two full-size concert Grand Steinways over from Poland when he moved to America. So to make it a very short thing, Schnabel would have his meals with us when he was in Cincinnati. And he was there frequently during the Brahms cycle that Eugene Goossens inaugurated in the country, the first Brahms cycle ever given here. and he played both the concerti, the B flat and the D minor. So I would see him at the meals, and he liked to take a walk after meals. And Dr. Lishniewski and Jocelyn, his daughter with whom I shared the suite of rooms, didn't feel like that. They had other things they wanted to do. So Schnabel and I we took many walks because he had many meals. And then at 15 years old, young people didn't ask a question, or if they were to ask a question, they would have to ask if they could ask a question. Mm-hmm. And he would do all the talking, of course. He was a great man, and it was not my place to say anything. And he would tell me wonderful things. He loved to talk. He was a great conversationalist. Some people said as good a conversationalist as a pianist, and there's some stories about that.
You also, your past interview with was it Wyszynski? Am I getting the name correctly here? Does the name Wyszynski mean anything to you?
The teacher with whom I lived?
Yeah. I mean, what was more about him? Yeah, maybe that's the name, yeah. What was the name again?
Dr. Karl with a K, Lishniewski.
Oh, I'm so off there. It's a non-Swedish name. That's I'm off there. Tell me more about him.
He grew up with Paderewski in Poland, and a young man, after the men all born, an equestrian. He was skillful with the rapier. He was a pianist. He was a litterateur. A very elegant young man. And both these gentlemen decided to go to Vienna and study with Lech Statitsky, who was the great mentor in Europe, as was Ernest Hutchison here in America. And he was a great teacher, I had a 2-hour lesson with him every day.
Wow.
And I practiced a whole bunches, of course, and I loved that. And the way in which I made contact with him was in entering a competition in Oregon, Corvallis, Oregon. For some reason, held an audition to receive a scholarship with Dr. Lishniewski. And the sad thing is that we all played, 17 of us played the same piece. That was the conditions. And the piece was the D-flat Romance of Sibelius, a lovely piece. It's about 4 pages long and very dynamic. It's a piece you want to, or I shouldn't say piece, a composition. We have a piece of pie, but we don't have a piece of music. That's from being a teacher, and the little kiddies say piece, they can't say composition or literature or work or thing. It's not the kind of work an adjudicator wants to hear more than once, but he had to listen to it 17 times, or the panel. There were 3 or 4 adjudicators, and I hope they're well.
You were a solo performer, but you also did a lot of accompanying.
Yes.
What do you like the best? Do you like?
Oh, they're different.
Right.
I can't compare them really. I'm not a professional pianist. I love to play, and I do this out of love, not out of seeking a career or working my way up in some company to get higher wages or whatever. I just love to play.
You accompanied Yoshi Fujiwara, is that it?
Yoshi Fujiwara, yes, I was his accompanist when he was in America on his last tour, Japan's great tenor.
Yeah. And
he founded the Fujiwara Opera Company in Tokyo. Yes, this was his last world tour. And I loved it because I became acquainted with some of the Japanese classics, the Palanquin Bearer and all kinds of things with Fujiyama in the title. Beautiful music. He had a group of Japanese pieces on his program. And then when he returned to Japan, he sent me a volume of Japanese pieces. Beautiful. I have that. I cherish it.
How did he connect with you? How did that occur?
Oh, because I was in Salt Lake City and I had a big studio, amongst which were some Japanese people who knew him. And then they were responsible for finding an accompanist for that particular phase of the tour.
You have influenced an awful lot of people. Who were the two or three, teachers that influenced you the most?
Oh, in different ways. The influences I have had have been with Percy Granger and Boguslavsky and Rudolph Gans and Joseph Levine. Joseph Levine was, in my opinion, the greatest of the pianists. People say Liszt is the greatest pianist. We have no record of his playing. Mm-hmm. Certainly he was a great pianist, but we can't make really valid assessments because we've never heard him play. But Joseph Levine we've heard. And of course his wife, Rosina Levine, was Van Cliburn's teacher at Juilliard. She was on that staff for many, many years. She was a fine pianist, very fine pianist. But I think Joseph Levine changed my life. That's what the masters do, Mr. Peterson. I've heard Chrysler play in his heyday at the Los Angeles Philharmonic Auditorium, 11 encores. The manager turned off the light and said, ladies and gentlemen, the theater is closing, but nobody moved. We stayed there, and then finally he came out and turned on the lights and said, oh, well, Mr. Chrysler would like to play another work. And so he came. He was perfectly happy. He would have played all night. But every time I hear the masters, something changes inside of me.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. If you had not, you focused quite a bit on the classical music. If you had not focused in on the classical music, what genre would you have focused in on?
I love jazz.
Really? Jazz
is a great art. And I heard Benny Goodman and Lionel Hampton and Gene Krupa and one more. Oh dear, it'll come to me. One of their last performances, because Gene Krupa had leukemia, he could hardly walk on the stage. I heard of it at SPAC. You know what SPAC is? Yeah. Saratoga Performing Arts Center, where I sat on the grass and listened to them. Improvised jazz. I don't want it canned jazz. I want improvised. It's a supreme art. And I would play it, but my hand doesn't even hardly take an octave. And it would be useless to try. Jazz, I've heard U.B. Blake. I have a huge library of Art Tatum, the greatest of the piano jazz players. It's unbelievable. And but one really needs a tent to play the jazz. So I don't play it, but I have the highest esteem for it. I would even go so far, sir, as to say in its genre it's as great as is classical music. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
In fact, I know Ken Burns, when he did his documentary on jazz, that's probably one of the great things that America has given to music.
Yes.
Yes. Just that jazz.
It's marvelous music.
Ever been down to New Orleans just to sort of get the flavor of
mm-hmm.
the heartbeat of jazz?
Mm-hmm.
Tell me about Tom. What's he like?
Oh, I adore him.
You wanted me, Tom, it's with the message. Please ask about me. When did you connect with him?
Well, to begin with, his lovely wife, Tari, was my piano student when she was a little girl. And then she grew up and married Tom, and they have a family of 2 wonderful boys, and they were my students. So it was unavoidable. He couldn't help it.
You never got him to take a lesson, though?
Not yet, but I'm working on
There
it.
you go. Maybe today, right here, Tom. This could be it. You also note that as part of your student list, you had Dennis Drew of the 10,000 Maniacs.
Yes, but he was a young boy in the high school. Yes.
Did you get a sense that he would kind of drift off into the kind of that?
Well, he was very musical. I didn't know where he'd drift, but he was very talented.
Did he send you any of his music to critique?
Beg your pardon?
Did he ever send any of his music to critique? Because he wrote an awful lot.
Oh, yes. No, I just have not had that good fortune yet. I still have time left on the planet, and I'll get to that.
How did you get to Jamestown, New York?
I love it. I've been very, very homesick for Jamestown. I've been gone almost a year.
And you came here in Jamestown, what, 1970s?
He's 73 to be precise.
And what was the occasion to bring you here?
Mostly the schooling. My family was a co-principal of the Casadega High School. And I decided that I would start a studio, and there it was.
How does one start a studio?
Well, I do it my way. I don't know of anybody who does it this way. First of all, I never advertise. In music, advertising is incongruous. It just doesn't fit. And I go to the homes. I just spread the word. That when I go to the dentist, I tell him I'm a piano student. If I go to the podiatrist, I tell him I'm a piano teacher. I said student, I meant to say teacher. Go to a restaurant and have a sandwich, I tell them I'm a piano teacher. Pretty soon, and then I make connections with the schools and get in with the musicians. But where I differ from others mostly is that I go to the homes to teach the first 2 years. I went to Mr. Geisler's wife's home to begin teaching her. Yes, right on her own piano. Then after 2 years, I move into a studio, always with 2 pianos. Yeah. I need always 2 pianos.
You did that in Chicago, didn't you? Start when you really to do your first sort of studio. Didn't you go around from various homes in was it Chicago that you did that?
To the homes?
Yeah.
That must have been someplace else.
Okay.
Are you thinking of when I started my first studio?
Yes, yes.
That was in Los Angeles,
okay.
Sir. That was in the Boyle Heights, dreadful, dreadful slum area of Los Angeles. And nobody had ever been in there with music before, and I decided I would like to try that. If nobody's been there, I want to see why if pro and con. So I went around to the different doors, which were very dilapidated. Different kinds of woods, different kinds of corrugated tin. I've never seen that in the later years here. And I would knock on the door and say, my name is such and such. I'm a piano teacher. Do you have any children who would like to take piano lessons? 25 cents an hour. I never figured out it's 12.5 cents a half hour, but I didn't give half-hour lessons. I just stayed with the hour. And then I went to one home and knocked, and this family was an old lady and an old man. These houses were 3 rooms, if they were lucky, or 2. And they had a piano that their son had found in the city dump. Someone had thrown an upright piano in the city dump, and he and his friends cleaned it up and brought it to the family home there of 3 rooms, and that was my studio. I had it tuned, of course, and very, very wonderful year. I walked through the slums unattended and never had any kind of remark passing by or anything.
So that was the beginning of your entrepreneurial spirit.
Yeah, that was the beginning of my teaching. Instead of reading a book on how to teach, I did it.
So you've done it for so many years, and obviously part of what being in Jamestown, you've become so well known. Why do you think Jamestown seemingly has such a receptiveness to music, whether it's the high schools? I mean, this seems quite an extraordinary area for being maybe a semi-rural area. Why do you think they have such an interesting tradition of music?
Well, I've seen programs from the 1940s where you had all the greats coming here. Jamestown High School, when the Mason and Hammond was there, that Ralph Farrar bought. Pardon me. And then the Steinway was placed there. The greats, you've had everything. Heifetz, you've had just everybody in all the kinds of... Joseph Levine was here, Grace Moore. I've seen these programs. You know who has that? Tyler Swanson.
Tyler Swanson, yeah.
He was given this book, huge volume, almost falling apart now. It has so much in it, it can't hold itself together. A man named John Johnson gave it to him. And I think John Johnson was alive only a couple of years after I came here, so I didn't have the delight of meeting him. And this volume is a revealing of the culture that was here in Jamestown. It starts with that. However, it has to have a continuum, and it has great talent here, like Brian Bogey, a genius. He is a genius. I remember Carol Conway. She's very delightful, talented. We have Pat Sandel. I could go on and on and on. You have enlightenment here. A remarkable amount of enlightenment for something this size. And that keeps it going. It had a good beginning, going on.
Well, and I remember personally the time period when your favorite genre was really developed here. This was the Duke Ellington, the Count Basie, the Buddy Riches, the Lionel Hamptons. They would come year after year after year. Somebody of that ilk and layer, and they would bring him in, because I went to all those. That's my interest. But as a young child, I remember seeing all of them, and that made a huge impression and an interest in jazz thereafter. So it continued. So all the names that you had in the 40s and 50s, I remember kind of segued into the 60s with all the jazz people here, and so that's part of the continuum.
Yes.
Helga, you are, by the way, an amazing person. I'm looking at you, and you keep telling me, and I keep reading that you're 90 years old. I almost will say I don't believe you, because you're so well tuned in. You track so well. You look so great. What's the secret of all of this? What's the Helga Hulse secret that makes you so vibrant and alive today, and to do an hour and a half recital on Sunday? Amazing.
I don't think of that. It doesn't occur to me. I'm looking elsewhere. I couldn't answer that question. I enjoy every day, and I try to learn every day, and I want every day to be an adventure.
One of your great adventures was a program you had at the sheriff here in Chautauqua County working in the jail.
Yes.
What inspired you to wake up one morning and say, I want to go up and go to Mayville and be part of a musical program there?
The beginning of this was many years ago. For at least 20 years, I wanted to go to the inaccessible parts of the world and bring music. I believe music is a tremendous power in life. The appearance of sound, the spectrum of sound and color that comes from motion, It's a great integrator. It's the great inspirer, the right kind of music. And just as I felt when I went into the city slums of Los Angeles, I wanted to go where someone hadn't been before. No one had ever been in the jails before for the kind of thing I wanted to develop. And I wanted to reach the people who had not made this contact in life, because it will bring them joy, it will help, I believe, give them the vibrations they need in their body. It's instantaneously made conscious in the brain. There's no delay between the music and the person who's receiving it. It's instantaneous. Classical music is conceptual. It helps with the concepts. It helps with decision-making abilities, because consonants and architecture all give, they flow into concepts, and many people in and out of any kind of confinement are needing concepts. It encourages a lot of abilities within the person. And music brought out the best in every one of my students there. Absolutely. Both men and women and juveniles I taught all together, not just both, all three. And it brought out the best in them. The men were gentlemen every inch of the way. The ladies were ladies every inch of the way. And the juveniles looked so seeking for something that would bring them happiness. And it was strange for them because they hadn't heard classical music. I didn't just stay with classical music. We did show tunes, and now and then somebody would like to have from a movie. As a matter of fact, the gentlemen and ladies with whom I worked there always asked me for Beethoven. They all knew the Für Elisa of Beethoven. They all knew that work. I had a student in Mayville who was from a remote village in Nigeria, and she came into her music lesson and said, "I would like you to teach me da 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 bum 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 bum." Pardon me. She didn't know any more of it than that, but she had never. There were no music stores in her village. There were no concerts. Wonderful, wonderful excitement for me, because music was in them, and all that needed to be done was to give them a little guidance and tell them there's much more. There's more for this. It was a very, very wonderful, and the only program of its kind in the state of New York. There was no program like it. I gave a short lecture at the annual convention of educators of the incarcerated in Saratoga Springs. I think it was 2010, something like that. And the only one who did any music, but mine was planned. I wasn't volunteering, playing something and then say, I'll be back if you wish, you know, that kind of thing. This was discipline, regimen.
What did Sheriff Gerasi, what was his reaction when you presented this idea to him?
He took it immediately.
Right.
No, he's a man of vision.
Right.
Yes, he responded immediately.
What do you miss about Jamestown?
What do I think of it?
No, what do you, now that you're living in South Carolina, what do you miss about it?
I miss my dear friends.
Yeah.
Very much.
Try to keep in touch with them?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm not a very good letter writer up to this point. Now, as I become close to 91 here, I've decided this is just inexcusable, and I will write 2 letters a day.
Are you on the internet? Do you have?
I don't do computers, sir. I don't have a cell phone. I don't have a computer. I'm living another kind of life, I guess.
It's a life we kind of wish we had to
I'm
set.
totally illiterate in the computer world. My family is highly literate. They buy the latest thing that Apple does or anybody, but I'm not into that yet.
I know the Chautauqua Region Community Foundation actually has a fund in your name.
Yes.
The Marvin House. What did you think about that when they set that up for you?
That's the Shrek. And I have some similar ones up at Fredonia.
Yeah.
And I believe now I have succeeded in requesting that the Rudolf Schreck Scholarship, which is here, be awarded at Fredonia.
Mm-hmm.
The manner in which it's awarded is more disciplined. Pardon me. The requirements are higher for the award in Fredonia than they are here because there are more violin students, more advanced, and of course the university is going to attract these people. It's just a matter of the way nature works. And the area here has some very fine talent. But there's more of it in Fredonia, so the selection is more critical.
Did you teach at Fredonia?
No, I did not.
But
I
you
studied
graduated
at
from Fredonia.
Fredonia, yes. I'm studying now, too, at the Columbia University. I must study. I must keep getting better.
I love this. So you actually got your degree from Fredonia?
Yes.
You got your master's?
No, but I'm working on it. I think I will have my master's in, I've started my master's several times, but then I ran out of gasoline or automobile or what. But the last time I started my master's, I had to drive long distances in the winter and so on, go up to Rochester,
Right.
all by myself in the winter, and it was arduous. But anyway, I'm planning to get my master's and even go into more academia than that in criminal justice.
If you look back 90 years, Helga, all that you've accomplished, all the people you've met, is there any sort of area which you wished you had spent some more time on?
Lots of them.
Yeah. Like what?
Just numerous areas. But somehow or other, life pushes us on. We don't stay, there's nothing static in life. Yes, I wish I could have. My family moved a lot, and so certain parts of my education were not completed in the timely manner. They will be completed, though, or not completed. They'll come to a what do you call it, an evaluation point. They'll come to some temporary. Then I'll go on from there. But I haven't stopped studying all this time. You know, I don't have all the paper I would like, but I will have some of that. There's time left, and but I never stopped studying.
As you're here, and there's a piano right there, Helga, is there a song that floats through your head at this point? I mean, it's just being not a musical teacher, not even of that musical genre, but as you just sort of sit here, is there a song that sort of floats through your head that you're now have in your mind? Today, just even this morning when you had...
Subliminally?
Yeah. Is there something that you're sort of playing in your mind?
Sometimes I do that if I want to remember something. But generally I think of the content rather than follow a melody. I can do that too, but it's more generally I think of the music and its architecture and its quality, its style.
Have you written much at all? Have you composed?
Yes, I've composed quite a bit.
Yeah.
Yes. I belonged to the Composition Society of Los Angeles for a number of years. But I've written a lot for the beginners and for the visually impaired. Then, right now, I'm on 2 faculties in Southern California, one of which is unusual. It's a residential home for children who are taken away from their parents for numerous reasons. And this center has existed for many years. It's like 40, 50 years in Aiken, South Carolina. Never, ever, ever has there been music presented to these children. So I went there and spoke to a most astute executive director, a person who responds to ideas very fast. And so she hired me. And working with these children who come of homes without anything, 90%, 95% of them, and I must have music ready for them to play as we learn to read. That may be laborious because every one of them is weak on concentration. Focusing has not been in their home training. So road choices work very, very well while we do other things. And I have to have compositions for that. I've done a lot of that over the years, but I've also written for more sentient, well-trained people.
You said as we were walking in here that you have been to recitals at this particular Scottish Rite Consistory, but you've never played here.
No, I've never played here, but I've had students play here.
Can I impose on you just to play a little ditty, or whatever you want, whatever it's in your head, you can play from jazz to a place, because I've got that piano here, and I really want to be able to say that Helga Hulse played at the Robert Jackson Center. Could I impose on you to?
Oh, I'd love to.
That'd be great.
That wing like you do at home.
Oh, perfect.